The boy king looked down from his vantage point atop a hill to the rear of his army's encampment, which was hidden in the shadows of the great northern mountains. He surveyed the landscape, scarred by raging rivers and gashed by the melting snows for endless millennia, since the time of forgotten kings, whose names were lost to time and tongue, and which were long since weathered from the monuments erected to themselves. A labyrinth of deep gorges, cut by the slow, unstoppable march of the glaciers, extended off into the distance in all directions. Like a rock made dull and ill-defined by the river, his boyish complexion surrendered to the forces to which he was now exposed. Now worn and aged beyond his years, he reluctantly took the throne, made vacant by the untimely passing of his king father, who was taken not by the sword in glorious battle, but by treachery from within his closest council, leaving this boy, his well and rightful heir, to bear the weight of ruling the empire. A position he neither desired nor fathomed how he could fulfill, having never had to decide anything more than which games would fill his day. Alas, he is tasked with much that is well beyond his ken. A politician he must now be, to win the favor of the highborn, which would not, as a matter of course, follow a new king, unproven under few years. These potential rivals measure his every gesture, his every decision, to judge the toughness of his constitution. They push the boundaries of his will and tolerance to gauge his fortitude. They test the very resolve of the tenuous alliance that binds the great houses of the southern lands. An alliance which, if shattered, will plunge the kingdom into a time of great upheaval, as was foretold by the elders in the ancient common tongue. There will be a return to the lawlessness of old, when even the great beasts could not traverse the land for fear of battery or death. In counterbalance to the great lords of the king's court are the keepers of the gods. From the robed priests in their dark, cold temples to the warrior monks on horseback who swell the ranks of the king's army. They jockeyed for favor and sway, lest they relinquish the good grace of the crown and the ear of the king. And he needed them too, for they held the power to temper the suffering of his subjects in this time of great transition. To divert and occupy the thoughts of farmers and smiths, whose hands were made idle by flight from the invading hordes who were advancing from all the borders of the kingdom. Running from their lands, they turned refugee and could ignite into mayhem and violence, flung blindly in any and all directions. They might lash out at the king that tries to defend them, or the king that attempts to subjugate and incorporate them by force into the lands of neighboring jurisdictions. This potential for retribution must be tempered by faith in the wisdom of the gods. In the mountain's morning mist, thick like tar, the two armies clashed. Barely discernible from one another in the fog and chaos of war, they lurched towards one another, becoming one amorphous, writhing armored mass of steel and sword. Like one galaxy swallowing another, the king's army dwindled under the enemy's mass, badly outnumbered and ill-supplied. It became clear with the melting of smoke and mist that his army was decimated. The king realized he was now sovereign over nothing, including soon his own person. Giddy in the knowledge that the enemy shared their same faith, the priests looked upon this whole matter with malignant indifference. They took solace in the knowledge that their good fortune was assured, regardless of the outcome of this day's grim affair. Now owing no deference to the boy king, they barely acknowledged his presence at all. The king sat alone now, surveying the blood-stained valley, while awaiting his pending custody, as he overheard the whispered confessions of a drunk monk.